To know, to love, and to serve with Bishop Alfred Hughes, a series that listens to the message of Jesus, responds in love, and passes it on into the new millennium.
Greetings in the Lord. As you know, we're continuing our series on life in Christ. And in the first two sessions, we focused on the basic principles, first in personal morality and then in our relationships with one another. In the third, our last session, we then began to break open the content of the first three commandments. The first, our relationship to God in general. Secondly, the way in which we reverence His name. And thirdly, carve out space and time in our lives for Him. Can we now focus on three other commandments? The fourth, the fifth, and the eighth. And you have on your screen the pages in the Catechism, the numbers that those reflections will focus on. The fourth commandment addresses an issue that is a very significant issue in our own time, the family. How much the family seems to be under attack these days. We must remember the very way in which God created us, the only way in which He makes it possible for us to come into being is through the cooperation of a man and woman consecrated to each other and to our welfare as we come into the world. And so, as we listen to the words of the fourth commandment, honor your father and your mother, we're invited by God to appreciate the whole context of family in which God intends for us not only to be conceived and born, but reared and nurtured and nourished in life and faith. The family is the core unit in all of human society. It is intended to be by God a domestic church in which we're nurtured not only in the ways of human life, but our recognition of our relationship with God and with one another because of our origin and destiny in God. And it is important then for civic society to foster and strengthen and support family life, marriage, religion, property, health, persons of all ages. In this commandment, God invites us in the church to recognize that there are certain responsibilities that as children we have toward parents, and then responsibilities that parents have toward children. Children are very obviously, in the very words of the commandment, asked to show respect and reverence and responsiveness to their parents. But parents are enjoined as well to be present and available and to offer moral and intellectual and social formation for the children God entrusts to them. This fourth commandment also addresses the broader communal way in which we are called to live our lives. Not only do we come into the world in a family and hopefully are appropriately nurtured and supported and strengthened and educated and formed in family, but families too need to be bound together in society in support of one another. And that is the basis for the development of a good civic society and a government to guide that society. It may be helpful for us to quote directly from a passage that's found in paragraph 2240 in the Catechism. It is a quotation from Diognetus. Pay to all of them their dues. To all of them their dues. Taxes, to whom taxes are due. Revenue, to whom revenue is due. Respect, to whom respect is due. Honor, to whom honor is due. Christians reside in their own nations, but as resident aliens, they participate in all things as citizens and endure as if all things before them they were experiencing as foreigners. They obey the established laws. Their way of life surpasses those laws. So noble is the position to which God has assigned them that they, hopefully we, are not allowed to desert either the human society in which we live or the deeper reality of God's society into which we are born by baptism. And so, as Christians, we have genuine responsibilities to the broader society. The fifth commandment of the Lord, you shall not kill. It seems simple, direct. Obviously, in a positive way, it is inviting us to have a profound respect for human life. And the killing of all innocent people is abhorred by God because it is taking over the life that He has brought into existence in cooperation with human parents. There is, of course, a legitimate self-defense. As a matter of fact, self-defense is a way of protecting human life. And so there not only is a right to self-defense, there is also a responsibility for us to offer defense for the lives of others. And of course, this sometimes brings us into conflict. But pursuing what is positive in this commandment, in respecting the sacredness and dignity of the human person, we're recognizing that the body that is ensouled has a profound dignity. And we don't want to scandalize people by the way in which we live, because we can destroy not only the body, we can destroy the soul of other people. We're called in a positive way to promote health, our own health, the health of others. That is why scientific research that is in support of the goal of helping people in health is wonderful for us to support and encourage. We're also invited by this commandment to respect the bodily integrity God has given to us. Now, in our own age, a wonderful phenomenon that science has made possible now allows us to make gifts of organs, sometimes in life, or most of the time after death. Now, the principle we want to keep in mind here is that, first of all, generosity is blessed by God. The integrity of the human body is to be preserved in this life. When it is possible for us to do without a human organ, for instance, a kidney, and this provides the opportunity of someone else to be able to live, it is an expression of great sacrifice and love in support of life that can prompt us to do that. It's also commendable for us to make available the organs of our body after death to assist others. We're called by this commandment in a very special way to resist everything and anything that undermines respect for life. Homicide, the intentional killing of others, is never allowed except in self-defense. Abortion is forbidden by this commandment. Unless we think that this is a teaching that has not been present within the church from the very beginning, it can be very helpful for us to recognize at the end of the very first century, in the Didache, the teaching of the apostles, we have this: "You shall not kill the embryo by abortion, and shall not cause the newborn to perish. God, the Lord of life, has entrusted to men the noble mission of safeguarding life, and men must carry it out in a manner worthy of themselves. Life must be protected with the utmost care from the moment of conception. Abortion and infanticide are abominable crimes." From the first century of Christian teaching. Euthanasia snuffs out life at the end of the life cycle, and that too is not only forbidden, but represents a way in which we pretend that we're the ones that have brought life into existence and therefore have dominion over it, rather than accepting it as a gift intended to be given back as God calls us to return to Him. Suicide, of course, also snuffs it out for ourselves. And in war, if we engage in unjust aggression or prosecute war in the wrong way, we are violating this commandment. This 8th commandment invites us to address another issue that is a significant issue in our own day. We've talked about the significance of family, the significance of human life, and now the significance of truth, integrity in the living of life. The 8th commandment says, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor." And so we're invited to make sure that what we say externally is true in point of fact and what is in our own mind and heart. We're called to respect the truth. Now, obviously, there are times when people do not have a right to the truth, and in a way in which we speak ambiguously, we can protect the truth that would be harmful to reveal, but we can never speak falsehood, let alone speak it under oath. We cannot live a trustful relationship with one another if we do not expect and receive for one another truthful communication. And so, false witness, perjury are against the 8th commandment. Also, saying things about others that may be true that other people don't need to know, we call that detraction. Or speaking false things about others in order to turn people against them, that's calumny. All of these are ways in which we can violate the truth. But the 8th commandment, most of all, invites you and me to be men and women of integrity, so that what is objectively true is reflected both in what we say and what is in our mind and heart. God grant us the grace to be able to be true to the family, to life, and to truth.
In a moment, we'll be back to talk with Bishop Hughes and look at how we can respond to this message of Jesus.
It's like coming home again. I like the feeling.
Maybe it's time you took a fresh look at what's missing in your life.
God knows I've failed, but God's never failed me.
Maybe it's time you took another look.
When I went through that difficult time, I left the church, but the church never left me. I'm glad I'm back.
There's a warm welcome waiting. Maybe it's time you took another look. Come home. A message of hope with love from the Catholic Diocese of Baton Rouge. I'm Deacon Bob Frillo, and we're back again discussing this week's topic with Bishop Alfred Hughes. And in our previous session, we talked about having no other God before God and not taking His name in vain and to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. And right now we're looking at the fourth, fifth, and the eighth commandment. Bishop, in the fourth commandment, it has to do with honor your father and mother. And you talked about a responsibility that we all have in this as a civic structure or a social organization. Could you expound on that a little bit more and how that relates to that commandment?
Well, what is central to our social structure is the family unit. That's in the very nature in which God has created us and brings us into being. But families cannot live without the support of one another. We have to organize ourselves in a kind of community that pools resources, that maximizes the various gifts that people have in support of common life. So neighborhoods develop, towns, villages, towns, cities, and then the larger entities that we know as states and countries and so forth.
So the structure of that civic is to support the smaller, which is the family.
That's right. It's interesting, you know, the Catechism makes a distinction between society, which is the organization of human families, and government. A particular government that a society chooses may differ from one society to another. And there isn't any one form of government that the Church endorses and says, this is the best form of government. The Church has in many ways indicated what it is that should be present in an organized society for it to fulfill its purpose. And we talked about that a little bit in our second session on life in Christ, where the human dignity of the individual person is to be recognized. People are called to participate in an active way and not just be forced into an organized living together. What can be done on the lowest level of the organization of human beings should be done there. We should have a solidarity with everybody, even those who are poor. We should see work as contributing to the common good. We should have the common good in mind in the way in which we develop public policy and develop laws and try to address issues that face us.
So this goes much deeper than just, don't forget your parents when they get old.
That's right. That's right.
We probably could spend 2 or 3 days on the fifth commandment, that thou shalt not kill. I think you did an outstanding job on that. We discussed abortion, we discussed euthanasia, we discussed suicide, war, and we even talked about health and science, as we, the Church doesn't differ with science as it promotes health.
But I left an issue out.
Correct, and it's something that we're dealing with today, and that is capital punishment. The Church is very vocal with.
And it's very important that we help one another to understand the developments that are taking place, both in our understanding of this issue and our response to it. Fundamentally, the issue of capital punishment comes under that rubric of self-defense. Society has the right to defend itself. And in the tradition of the church has always recognized that the state does have the right even to take the life of a criminal who has engaged in heinous crime, continues to be a serious threat to others, and if there is no other way to contain that person and to protect society. Now, what we're saying in the church today, and our Holy Father is taking a leadership role here, is that third condition,
right,
in most cases no longer applies. We have developed such a sophisticated penal system that we do have alternatives that allow us to be consistent in our respect for the fact that life is given by God. God has alone has dominion over it, and ultimately we go back to Him on His timetable.
Sometimes in your own past experience, do you find that people tend to pick and choose what issues they want to deal with on this fifth commandment about thou shalt not kill? In other words, they will take placards and go march at the prison to defend the life of a criminal, and yet kind of feel it's all right to practice birth control and abortion might be an alternative. Have you found that in your own experience? How do you address that?
I think when we don't move into depth in this commandment and understanding of the teaching, we can easily become polarized in society on ideological grounds rather than appreciating the way in which all of these issues are intertwined. Now, there are many life issues that are all brought together under the rubric of respect for the sacredness of human life as originating from God, going back to God, and being His dominion. But there are different analyses that we need to bring to each of these life issues from the moral point of view. For instance, with regard to abortion, that is so utterly clear because it's totally innocent, defenseless life. When we're looking at the issue of capital punishment, we have someone who's far from innocent, at least in most cases. Now, the mistakes can be made too, and that also complicates our practice of capital punishment. But say the criminal has truly committed the crimes for which he has been convicted. We're talking about life that is not innocent. However, we have alternatives there, and it is better for us to preserve that respect for life, to provide a means of incarcerating, therefore protecting society over a lengthy period of time, the time of his life, and respect the sacredness of that human life. And we want the conversion of the criminal,
correct,
not his annihilation.
Beautiful. Do you find that in our I want to move on now to the eighth commandment, false witness. Do you find that I love what you said about that we must have truth in our relationships, and that these commandments help us to live in unity with God and with one another. How important is that being truthful? And
trust is undermined when truth is not there. We cannot possibly live human life in a truly human way unless we can trust one another. Now, something that I think we always want to keep in mind is that truth is basically the conformity of our minds and then what we say to reality. And so there's always an objective touchstone for truth, it's not just what we think. It's not just what we feel, or it's not just the way we like things to be. Truth has to do with the conformity of our mind and speech to reality.
Jesus said to Pilate, "What is truth?" I want to ask you, you mentioned about being ambiguous in our speech, which is not being not truthful, but not revealing all truth. Help us with that.
And I think I did not explain that well, so thank you for bringing that up again. Let's take a little example.
Okay.
Say a parent tells a child, when you're home alone, and someone calls and they ask, is your mother or your father there? And neither of us is there. For your own protection, I want you to say, my mother or my dad, whoever they're asking for, is not able to come to the phone now. Can I take a message? Mm-hmm. Now, that person is being truthful but ambiguous, is not answering directly the question that is being asked. Now, it's legitimate for us not to answer directly questions of people who don't have a right to know, but we don't have the right to say what is untrue.
So, do you find that we confuse that much in today's lifestyle? And I guess I'm looking at the way we deal with one another as brothers and sisters and moms and dads, the political structure with our television advertising and different kinds of forms.
We don't know, I think, the extent to which the clever word, the attractive way of saying something has become more important than conformity to reality. And it's corrupting our ability to trust one another. If someone is promoting a product untruthfully, but in a very attractive package, we begin to lose confidence in the truth of all commercials.
So in a certain way, this eighth commandment, while it sounds like you shouldn't lie, has a lot to do with killing the respect of, and even when you gossip about someone, you take away from them certain things that they need to live as a true person in dignity.
That word gossip in the Catechism is referred to as detraction. It's saying something that may be true, but another person doesn't need to know, or we don't need to be talking about it.
I like what you said, to a person who has a right to know. In many cases, we share things with people, and it's not fair to the person receiving it, and it's not fair to the person that we've talked about.
And can I say, by way of conclusion, we have to be true when we speak to God about what's really going on in our lives, if it's going to be an authentic relationship.
And that's probably the most truth that we could get with. We will continue with our discussion on the commandments in our next session. And Bishop, we thank you, and we thank you for being with us.